Following the unrelenting pressure, DNC chair Ken Martin finally released an incomplete version of the so-called 2024 election autopsy, and it's missing one enormous topic, Cenk.
Yeah, it's missing Gaza. That's so weird, but don't worry, we'll explain. Khanna.
In fact, if you just do a quick word search of what they did release, here are the words that will not appear in the autopsy: AIPAC, ceasefire, foreign policy, Gaza, genocide, Israel, Palestine. Even though the autopsy is almost 200 pages long.
Yeah, I mean, they just couldn't fit it in, It has nothing to do with their largest donors being pro-Israel. But they didn't even look into it. Like there wasn't even a factor. But I'll tell you what I think is the real autopsy for the DNC after we tell you the receipts on this one.
Yes, so by the way, there's a few other things that I want to mention. Issues that do not appear in the 2024 election DNC autopsy. Joe Biden's decision to run for re-election.
I
mean, guys, I mean, even if you're a loyalist to Israel and you don't care that the autopsy didn't touch on something that obviously hurt the Democratic Party in the 2024 election, fine, put that aside. You can't take this autopsy seriously when it makes no mention of Joe Biden's decision to run for re-election when his brain had melted already. Okay. Yeah. Also, the anointing of Kamala Harris without a competitive primary, which really bothered me. I don't know if it bothered most Democratic voters, but for me, it was a big deal because the saving grace for the Democratic Party, despite all the mistakes that were being made, was the fact that they valued the will of the people and weren't trying to throw elections, rig elections, steal elections. They wanted to save democracy. And then they lied to the American people about Biden's mental health and then anoint Kamala Harris without giving us an opportunity to weigh in on it at all.
Yeah, they've got 4 out of the top 10 and arguably the top 3 on my list. They didn't even touch. Then how are you gonna find out what you did wrong if you go, okay, now we're not allowed to talk about the things we did wrong, so let's do an autopsy on what we did wrong. That's hilarious.
So let's get into what is included in the autopsy. And look, it was released today. I read as much of it as I could. And what I noticed is they were very hands-off when it came to Kamala Harris's mistakes, in my opinion, from what I've read. But let's get to some specific details. So the report blames the Biden team for not glazing Kamala Harris enough. They don't use the word glazing. I'm just trying to, communicate in a way that people speak these days. The national campaign,
Thank you, Anna.
You're welcome. The national campaign did not effectively drive Trump's negatives. Really? And the White House did not effectively support Vice President Harris over 3.5 years to improve her standing before the candidate switch. Well, that's because Biden had no intention to step aside and allow her to run for president. He was planning to run for re-election all along, so why would he set her up to do well?
Yeah, to be fair, it goes further than that. So he threw her under the bus throughout.
Totally.
Like the idea that they weren't negative enough against Trump is comical, right? I mean, they've learned nothing, and this autopsy is a perfect symbol of the Democratic Party and how clueless they are today. But on the other hand, Kamala Harris did not get much support for 3.5 years from Biden.
True.
And then he made her not the border czar, but something that sounded like the border czar.
Hold on. So look, he did name her his border czar. And there's evidence of that. There are literally compilation videos of various Democratic operatives and media people referring to Kamala Harris as the border czar. Look, he set her up for failure. Yes. Obviously, solving the issue of immigration is a very difficult task, and the vice president really has no power. We have to confess that's the reality of the situation, right? I mean, the real purpose of the vice president is to serve as president if something actually happens to Joe Biden or whoever is president at the time, and also to be the tie-breaking vote if it's necessary in the Senate. And so just naming someone border czar without with knowing that that person doesn't even have the power to do anything about it, again, sets her up for failure. But I don't want anyone to mistake what I'm saying as, oh, I'm giving Kamala Harris a pass. I know that she only had 3 months to run a campaign, but she was not a great candidate for other reasons that we'll get into.
Yeah.
The report accuses Harris of taking too much for granted. So Harris wrote off rural America, assuming urban/suburban margins would compensate. Look, that is a fair critique. I just don't know if Kamala Harris campaigning in rural parts of this country would really make much of a difference. I don't know if her message would really be appealing to them. And look, the reason why I say that is because she moved away from economic populism entirely after the first month of campaigning. And that was because you had all of these, billionaires, whether it's Mark Cuban or that Reid Hoffman guy, she would say something that sounds vaguely maybe populist, and then they would jump in and be like, no. She's gonna go in a completely different direction. She hates Lena Khan. She's definitely not gonna hire Lena Khan to serve in her administration for sure.
Yeah, so, and they kept bragging about how 90 corporate CEOs backed her. It was a disastrous idea. Look, I have number one on my list is Biden's ego. That's why we lost. So there's 9 to 10 other ones that are super important, but Biden's ego affected it in that he had dementia, was in the mid-30s in polling, had no chance of winning, but he wouldn't get out of the race. But also because of what he did to Kamala Harris. He put her in charge of the border, full well knowing that that was the least popular position that they had. This was all left over. It's not even Joe Biden. It was Jill Biden who hated Kamala Harris for that one time that she challenged Biden during a debate. And she's like, let's screw over the vice president. But the vice president might have to run for office. So what are you torpedoing your own vice president for, you egomaniacs? You like totally out of control. And then he demanded loyalty from Kamala Harris after she was named and became the candidate. But that's an albatross around her neck.
It absolutely was. Yeah.
So Biden's ego sunk this campaign more than anything else, and the idea and the fact that they didn't even look into it shows you what ass kissers the leadership of the Democratic Party are. That they just cannot be honest, and they won't ever represent the voters until we get a candidate that totally cleans house in there. And so, but there's even more. So, Biden named Kamala Harris after his initial post saying that he's stepping down. He wasn't supposed to. Pelosi, him, and Obama had a deal where Pelosi and Obama were shockingly correct. They're like, let's have some sort of truncated primary because they knew that Kamala Harris couldn't do the job. And Biden decided to screw them over and go, you wanna push me out? I'll give you the worst possible candidate.
That's right.
Because both him and Dr. Jill Biden are the top 3 egomaniacs in the country along with Donald Trump. And they purposely sank the Democratic Party after decades of talking about unity and how you have to listen and vote blue no matter who. And they're like, oh yeah, let's give him Trump again. After telling us that Trump would destroy the country, they helped Trump to win the election. I got more on Kamala and others later, but that was number one.
So this one, all right, let me read this and then you tell me what you think, because I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I've been thinking about it a lot today. The Harris campaign appears to have relied on Trump being unacceptable rather than building an affirmative case for Harris. No, actually, I do agree with this entirely. Base voters needed reasons to vote for Harris as well as against Trump. I think that that's completely right. I think the Democratic Party has always seen Donald Trump as an unacceptable politician or candidate, and they have leaned too heavily into attacking him without really giving Americans something to vote for. I mean, we've been saying this, guys, since 2016, starting with Hillary Clinton's campaign. We get that Trump bad, we get it, okay? Democratic voters are already there. But remember, you're trying to appeal to independent voters, and we just had 4 years of Biden's administration where inflation was an issue, the border was an issue, there was all sorts of issues. So Kamala Harris, give us something to vote for. How are you going to be different? What is the experience gonna be under your administration versus the Biden administration? And yeah, you wanna do attack ads against Trump, that's fine. But at the end of the day, you gotta give people in the middle or the independent voters a reason to support you. Otherwise, they're not gonna show up to the polls.
Yeah.
And in this case, they actually thought Trump's campaigning was more effective and they showed up to vote for him overwhelmingly.
Yeah, so look, at this point, if you haven't figured out that Trump bad is not enough to get a vote, I mean, you're just hopeless, right? And will they run a similar campaign next time if an establishment Democrat is the candidate? Of course, absolutely. Whoever it is that they're running against, they'll say that person bad, make no. Now, wait, we have deeply popular policies. You look at populistplank.com, those are all left-wing Democratic policies. All of them poll over 2/3. So where's the question? Why don't you run an affirmative campaign saying, I'm for paid family leave? I'm with 84% of Americans who want moms to take 12 weeks off after they have a baby, right? Well, you don't run that campaign because 90 corporate CEOs are on your side and they told you to never do any of the policies that you state. And in fact, they will bribe you to make sure that you don't do any of your popular policies. And then afterwards, you're like, oh, I don't know why we lost. We didn't emphasize any of our popular policies. I mean, if you're gonna be literally that stupid, it's not, that's how you, and guys, they didn't just lose to like an amazing politician. They lost to a guy that is barely double digits in IQ. And a guy who is deeply, deeply corrupt, one of the most corrupt men in American history. They lost to him anyway. That's what happens when you purposely run the most miserable campaigns you could possibly imagine.
Right, so okay, I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. We're not gonna get into every nook and cranny of the report, but the part that I thought was well done for the most part was, hey, you need to move away from identity politics and focus on economic messaging. And that's exactly right. I'm sorry, the identitarian stuff divides people. It fractures the Democratic base. It makes them obsessed with how different they are or how they should be treated differently than other groups of people. It's not helpful. When you focus on economic issues, you're focusing on improving the lives of everyone. That is an appealing message, and that's essentially what they're trying to say here. So, and they also say male voters require direct engagement. The gender gap can be narrowed. Deploy male messengers, address economic concerns, and don't assume identity politics will hold male voters of color. And that was demonstrably true in the last presidential election, right? Where you had a larger share of black male voters, unfortunately voting for Donald Trump. And so the identity politics that Barack Obama engaged in trying to essentially, I don't know, like bully black young men into voting for Kamala Harris, that didn't work. In fact, that came across as incredibly insulting.
Yeah, look, so I'm gonna get into my autopsy in a second, but it could also be summarized in the establishment hates real voters. So they run campaigns based on what they like rather than what the voters want. And it's not complicated. In fact, I'll prove that to you right now. So first off, to Anna's point, there's a poll that just came out. Do you think that the Democratic Party should move further left or towards the center? Now, people always ask that question in a nonsensical way. Wait, what do you mean left, right? So this poll, on the other hand, did a good job, to be fair to them, and it's New York Times Siena poll. And they broke it down. Move to the left in general. Only 25% said move to the left, 18% said don't move in either direction, and 52% said move to the center. But wait, on which issues?
That's important.
Right, so on crime, they said don't move to the left, move to the center. On immigration, don't move to the left, move to the center. On economic issues, wait a minute, now totally split, right? And it depends on what you mean by left. That's a little bit more complicated, but economic populism does poll well. So now that's very different than the other issues. Transgender issues, don't move left, move to the center. And by the way, a lot of them say keep where you are, okay? Finally, this is the most important one. On healthcare, it says move to the left, move to the left, go to the left, okay? Now why? Because all the different categories we read to you where Democratic voters say don't move to the left are culture war issues. They're like, we don't want, I got it on the culture wars. I'm done with it. I don't want you to move further left, okay? Economic issues, yes, for God's sake, move further left because we're getting nothing. So now two more things to back it up. New York Times, more than 80% of the party's backers thought the political and economic system should be torn down entirely or needed major changes. And nearly 90% called the economic system unfair.
I jump in it.
Now, see, if you said to a cable news anchor, hey, should we tear down the system entirely? Who thinks that? They would say, oh, the radical left, maybe 2% of the population, very unpopular, right? And the real number is 80%. Like the people in Washington and on television are not connected to real human beings at all. They're all elitists. They have no idea what's going on. Okay, now this is the one that's gonna really get under their skin. Nearly 3/4 of Democratic supporters now oppose military aid to Israel, up from 45% 3 years ago. So I was literally talking to a TV producer right before I came on the show. And they were like, well, don't you think that this is gonna, cause the Democratic Party to become more unpopular? I'm like, why? 75% is popular. And 61% of the country says we shouldn't give any military aid to Israel anymore, and that they have a negative view of Israel. So how would it be unpopular to be popular? But in their minds, they're like, must serve Israel, must serve Israel, must serve corporate donors, right? Well, that's why you're losing.
So can I just jump in, because Khanna just posted this on X, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys, after 2024, my distaste for the Democratic Party overall grew so significantly that I didn't want to listen to Democrats. I don't want to hear Democrats. By the way, I've never, been a fan of the Republican Party either. So I was just kind of floating in no man's land and just very cynical about all politicians. But Khanna has really grown on me, mostly because of the fact that he is willing to get the job done. And if that means working with someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene to get the Epstein files released, or Thomas Massie to get the Epstein files released, he will do it, because getting those files released is more important than signaling his purity in denying, Marjorie Taylor Greene or Massie in doing this type of work. Now, with that said, here's what he said about the DNC autopsy, and this is why he's growing on me. There is not a single mention of Gaza in the 192-page DNC autopsy report. As someone who campaigned in Michigan and Wisconsin, let me tell you, one of the main reasons we lost was our blank check to Israel while they committed genocide. Our party must put human rights first.
Yeah.
That's the right statement. That's the right statement.
Yeah, and by the way, both Khanna and Tom Massie have talked about this. Why weren't there more Democrats involved in trying to get the Epstein files released in the beginning, especially when they all voted for it eventually? So why weren't they all there in the beginning? Because in the beginning, they all insisted that it be partisan and that they only talk about Trump and the Republicans.
I didn't know that.
And Khanna said, no, we're gonna release all of the files. We're not gonna make it partisan. And we have to reach out to the other side and have a real coalition. He dragged the entire party over to there, which wound up helping Democrats a lot, right? It hurt Trump a lot, but they had to be dragged there kicking and screaming.
That's crazy, wow.
Okay, so now look, let me do my real autopsy for you guys, because it'll give you a sense of what they could have done instead. So number one on my list, you'd be surprised where Gaza is, by the way, on my list. So number one is Biden's ego, I explained it already. Number two is Kamala Harris was a terrible candidate. They didn't even talk about that. She couldn't speak in clear sentences. If you can't speak in clear sentences, you're gonna lose the election, right? I mean, we were just ignoring this giant elephant in the room. Number three, they didn't have any real primary. They would push out any candidate that had any chance of winning and anoint the worst possible candidate. If you don't have competition to see who your best candidate is, you're gonna pick a bad candidate. Number four is they wouldn't do the huge podcast interviews. Well, you're literally giving up hundreds of millions of dollars in free media because you're saying, I'm so unpopular that if I spoke to people for an hour or 3 hours, they would like me less. So I'm just not even gonna talk to them. Well, then you shouldn't be the candidate, period. If you're gonna give away hundreds or millions, maybe billions of dollars in free media because you're worried you're too incompetent to run and too unlikable, then don't run. And we definitely shouldn't pick you. Number five, Harris kept bragging about the corporate CEOs that were on her side. You couldn't, and she ditched all of her economically populist policies that were really popular in the beginning. And that actually, she took the lead with those policies and with Tim Walz, and then she dropped them because of the moronic consultants who told her, no, Americans love corporate CEOs. Number five, she kept, sorry, that was five. Six is, she should have pointed out that Trump's a warmonger and all of his backers wanted him to support Israel's wars. Instead, she's like, I love Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney. I'm the real warmonger. Oh, you idiot. that was deeply problematic. Number 7 was the border. Number 8 is the cultural war issues. I have embracing Israel all the way down at number 9 because not because it's not important, but because the other 8 were so monumentally important.
Yeah, they are.
Right?
They were, absolutely.
So, but yes, that was, she purposely chose the unpopular position on Israel because her donors demanded that she hurt her campaign to support Israel over Democratic voters' actual positions. Finally, listening to any Democratic consultant will get you a loss.
Get them out.
Yeah, those Democratic consultants are utter losers. They've lost almost every major election, and they just keep getting rehired and rehired. Oh, what moronic opinion do you have for me? So, and I threw in a bonus one in social media. Number 11 is go to a cocktail party in Washington, listen to what everyone's saying, and do the exact opposite. Because if you listen to what they're saying, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
They have no idea how elitist they are and how unbearable they are and how their opinions are diametrically opposed to the opinions of the American people. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.